Thank you. I give the call to member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Australian taxpayers deserve much greater accountability and transparency concerning the subsidies they provide to politically active environmental organisations that often, and in some cases habitually, engage in criminal behaviour. And in this grievance debate, I'm calling on all my colleagues in this parliament to ensure this farce comes to an end. Taxpayer subsidies for many environmental organisations exist because the law recognises that work to protect or improve the environment is a charitable activity, and the subsidy provided to them by the taxpayer via a tax break for that purpose is clearly valid for the great majority of the 600+ organisations around the country that now enjoy it. How it works is that donations to environmental groups that have achieved, via an application to the Environment Department, what is known as deductible gift recipient status, DGR status, and they can offer tax breaks to their donors, which means Australian taxpayers forego the revenue. In return, what the taxpayer gets, ostensibly, and often in practice, is on-the-ground work to protect threatened species or to restore disturbed landscapes, or through the conduct of research or the provision of educational materials that further such causes. And these endeavours are formally and quite reasonably regarded by both the courts and the legislatures in Australia, as indeed they are in many parts of the world, as charitable activities, worthy of that sort of support. The problem is that some of these organisations, and they tend to be some of the largest of these organisations, have become not so much providers of direct environmental benefit as would be perceived by most Australians via on-the-ground work to protect threatened fauna or flora, or via educational research work to inform public debate, but instead have become virtually full-time and vigorous political activists with flagrant, repeated disregard for the laws of the land. Their serial criminal behaviour is well documented, and I will give some examples. The scale of their disregard for the statutory constraints on political behaviour is, given the totally unsatisfactory state of their supervision under the systems we have in place, simply unknown. But given their indisputable record on general lawlessness, law-breaking in the party political context certainly cannot be discounted and needs to be more rigorously audited. In the first instance, we should not tolerate the continuation of tax breaks for organisations that break the law. For example, Greenpeace has DGR status. In 2011, 2 Greenpeace staffers in the dead of night destroyed a crop planted by the CSIRO here in the ACT because it was genetically modified. They were convicted and sentenced to 9 months in prison, suspended. Greenpeace subsequently paid $282,560. What proportion of that restitution was drawn from the organisation's taxpayer-funded subsidy? We cannot know. The judge said that the crime was conducted, and I quote, at the instigation of, or with the backing of, those who are ultimately responsible for the operation of Greenpeace Australia. Yet Greenpeace retains its DGR status and its charity status, despite being a serial offender, as was made clear years before the crop incident. A Greenpeace submission to an ATO discussion paper in 2003 said, and I quote, "We have blocked train lines, occupied Lucas Heights, trespassed at the Lodge, illegally raised banners at Parliament House, amongst other activities. This history of civil disobedience is part of a much bigger history of individuals and organisations prepared to violate the law," close quote. An outfit called Counteract, part of Friends of Earth, runs training camps to teach green activists how to frustrate lawful development and get arrested. Yet Friends of the Earth retains DGR status and its taxpayer subsidy. Lock the Gate, which has DGR and charity status, blockaded a gas exploration operation near Grafton in 2013. 18 people were arrested on 25 changes. In 2014, Lock the Gate took part in a blockade of the property of a dairy farmer at Bentley after he had allowed Medgasco to drill a well on his land. A blockade of a proposed liquid natural gas facility near Broome was led by the Wilderness Society, a DGR, and cost WA taxpayers $1 million to manage. The Leard Forest Alliance, composed of 5 registered environmental organisations, namely Greenpeace, Lock the Gate, the Wilderness Society, Friends of the Earth, the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales, has habitually and unlawfully obstructed Whitehaven Coal's operation at Mullis Creek, where there have been over 350 arrests. More recently, there has been periodic, endemic, illegal behaviour at Abbott Point in Queensland in protest over the proposed Adani coal mine. Deputy Speaker, Australian taxpayers should not be subsidising this sort of illegal behaviour. If the members of these organisations want to illegally disrupt lawful business activity, that's their business, and it ought to be at their risk. It ought not be part funded by the government and, by extension, the taxpayer. The Environment Department currently has responsibility for the Register of Environmental Organisations. The department made clear in the recent parliamentary inquiry into the register, and I quote, "We cannot compel. We have no evidence-gathering powers or the capacity to coerce information from somebody through the obtaining of warrants or any of those sorts of mechanisms that might be available to other regulators." Close quotes. It was also made clear to the inquiry that the department does not require audited financial statements from those on the register, except by specific individual demand, and that insofar as those organisations have to report, if they do at all, the department runs checks against about 10% of them a year. Deputy Speaker, it is a near certainty that the vast majority of the 600+ organisations listed on the register will be totally honest, hard-working, community-based, altruistic, on-ground operators trying to improve Australia's environment. There's no doubt about that. For many of the big outfits, however, where the bulk of the effort is in political and social activism, the current arrangements a little short of a farce, quite frankly. And the Australian taxpayer deserves better. Responsibility for the Register of Environmental Organisations ought to be transferred as a matter of urgency to the Australian Taxation Office. And the examination of the largest of them ought to be annual and forensic, with special regard to their involvement in or sponsorship of illegal activities, as well as the exact nature of those political activities. Deputy Speaker, organisations that are granted DGR status have a very important role to play. And I would be very surprised, Deputy Speaker, if anybody in this House, regardless of their political colours, would deny benevolent organisations that DGR status. Taxpayer subsidisation should take place where organisations make a better world. And there is a right, indeed a constitutional right, for individuals, for groups, for organisations to communicate politically, to be politically active. I don't think anyone in this House would deny that right, even if we disagree with some of either their motives or their stances. But I don't think we'd deny the right. In fact, we'd fight for that right. But what we shouldn't tolerate, Deputy Speaker, what we shouldn't tolerate is the Australian taxpayer subsidising political activism by environmental groups that purport to be helping the environment when in fact they're engaging in nothing but political activism. That defies the very principle of what DGR is meant to be about, and it undermines the very sector that other environmental groups work within.
Thank you. I give the call to